You ever wonder what a parent's love really looks like when it's pushed to the edge? Because it's not always bedtime stories, packed lunches, and shiny smiles on school picture day. Sometimes it's crawling through the mud so your kid can walk on marble floors. Sometimes it's blood on your hands so their hands stay clean. And sometimes, it's doing the kind of things that make you look at yourself in the mirror and whisper, "God, forgive me." Before I continue the story, kindly, like, subscribe and tell us where you're listening from. That was me. That's my story. And today, I'm laying it out for you, because I need someone to hear it. Someone to know why I did what I did. I wasn't born into money. Not even close. My life was a carousel of odd jobs and unpaid bills. But when my daughter came into the world, I swore she wouldn't carry my curse. She would have more. She would shine where I stumbled. So I hustled. I clawed. I sweated every drop of energy into her future. And at first, it was simple, working 2, 3 jobs, sleeping in shifts, selling off the little I had. But as she climbed into higher grades, so did the stakes. Good wasn't good enough anymore. She needed to be the best. And that's when I crossed the line. Let me tell you what sacrifice smells like. It smells like bleach and cigarette smoke. Nights I cleaned offices until dawn, scrubbing floors that executives spit gum onto. My back would scream, my hands raw, but the paycheck barely covered her textbooks. So I started cutting deals. Small at first. A little cash to a teacher for extra attention. A gift card here, a discreet envelope there. The kind of things nobody admits, but everyone knows happen behind closed doors. She came home with better grades. Smiles. Praise from teachers. It worked. But success is a hungry beast, it eats, and the moment you feed it, it demands more. By high school, I wasn't just bribing. I was pulling strings. I knew which administrators had debts, which coaches drank too much, which tutors needed silence about their side hustles. I leveraged everything. I became a shadow that made sure her record stayed spotless, her applications screamed perfection, and her failures disappeared like smoke in the wind. And she believed it was all her. She strutted with medals that I bought. She gave speeches written by someone else's pen. And every time she looked at me with that teenage sneer, the one that said, "You'll never understand my world," I bit my tongue. Because wasn't this what I wanted? Wasn't the goal to build her a life so polished she'd never see the dirt under it? But let me tell you something most parents won't admit, sacrifice starts as love, but if you're not careful, it rots into resentment. Every envelope I slipped under a desk, every lie I told for her, it was like stacking bricks on my back. And one day, when I looked up, I realized the house of success I'd built wasn't hers, it was mine. My blood built it. My sins built it. She was just living in it, smiling for the cameras. Still, I kept going. Because I told myself it would all be worth it when she walked across that stage. That image carried me through the dirtiest jobs, through the stink of sweat and shame, her, in cap and gown, smiling at me with gratitude. Maybe even love. You think I'm exaggerating? Listen. I once broke into a locked file room to swap a failed test paper for a forged one. My heart slammed so hard I thought security would hear it from the lobby. I walked out with the paper hidden in my jacket, drenched in sweat, but she never knew. Another A. Another round of applause. Another time, I spent rent money to pay off a professor who threatened to expose her plagiarism. That month, I slept in the back of my car, telling her the apartment had maintenance issues. She laughed, rolled her eyes, never asked questions. Why would she? She had her world handed to her, neatly wrapped. And every time I saw her winning, smiling in photos, holding trophies, I told myself the same lie: one day, she'll understand. One day, she'll see what I did for her. But deep down, I think I knew she wouldn't. See, kids raised on gold never smell the sweat that bought it. She grew into someone who expected success, not someone who earned it. And me? I grew into a ghost. The shadow behind her spotlight. And yet, despite it all, despite the gnawing bitterness, I still dreamed of that graduation day. The day she'd cross the stage, diploma in hand, and look for me in the crowd. Maybe she'd smile. Maybe she'd wave. Maybe, for the first time in years, she'd see me, not as the tired, broke, invisible parent, but as the reason she stood where she stood. That's the cruel thing about hope. It doesn't die easy. Even when the evidence screams otherwise, it clings. So I scraped together enough for a decent suit. Pressed it myself, hung it by the window for days so the wrinkles would fall out. I saved bus fare to get to the university. Sat in the back row of that grand auditorium with tears in my eyes, waiting for my moment. The moment when all the sacrifices, all the dirty secrets, would be worth it. But here's the part you came for, isn't it? The twist. The moment everything turns. Because what happened that day at her graduation wasn't gratitude. It wasn't love. It wasn't even acknowledgement. No. What she gave me in front of everyone, her classmates, her professors, her future bosses, was something else entirely. And trust me, that's when the story really begins. You ever sit in a crowd and feel invisible? Like you're breathing the same air as everyone else, clapping when they clap, smiling when they smile, but inside you're just a ghost. That's how I felt the day I walked into her graduation ceremony. The auditorium was massive, dripping with pride and money. Banners in school colors hung from the walls, the kind of fabric that whispered wealth even when it was silent. Parents in tailored suits clustered together, taking selfies like they were at the Oscars. Mothers wore pearls that probably cost more than my rent for a year. And me? I had on the one suit I owned, pressed so carefully I prayed nobody would notice it had been bought secondhand years ago. I sat near the back. Always near the back. It's safer there, nobody asks questions, nobody looks too closely. My hands trembled in my lap, clutching the program with her name printed in bold. My chest swelled. That's my daughter, I thought. No matter what it cost me, no matter how I bled, she's about to walk that stage. For a moment, I almost let myself believe it would be beautiful. That she'd see me, maybe blow me a kiss, maybe mouth the words "Thank you, Dad." I know, it sounds naive. But hope makes fools of us all. The music started. That slow, pompous march everyone knows, the kind that drags like chains and still manages to feel triumphant. Students filed in, row after row, a sea of black gowns and square hats bobbing under the lights. Parents leaned over the seats, snapping photos, shouting names, waving with tears in their eyes. And then, there she was. My daughter. She walked in with her head high, chin tilted at the perfect angle for cameras. Her smile flashed like a blade, dazzling, confident. The crowd's noise swelled as families recognized their kids, but for me, time stopped. That was my girl. My work. My blood walking across the stage as if she owned the world. I stood halfway, clapping harder than anyone. My palms stung, but I didn't care. For that second, pride drowned out the bitterness. Then her eyes found me. Do you know that moment when someone sees you and, in an instant, decides you don't exist? That was it. Her gaze skimmed across me, froze, and then shifted away like I was gum on the sidewalk. She tightened her smile, turned her head, and laughed at something one of her friends whispered. A deliberate dismissal. But it didn't stop there. When the ceremony reached the point where graduates were allowed to invite family closer for photographs, I stood up, heart pounding. My hands shook as I tried to make my way down the aisle. This was the moment I'd imagined for years, the photo, the hug, the acknowledgement. I called her name. Soft at first. Then louder. She turned. And in front of her classmates, her professors, her friends, she lifted her hand like a traffic cop and waved me back. Not the kind of wave that says "Hi, I see you." No. It was sharp. Cold. Final. The kind of wave that says, "Not here. Not you. Not ever." A ripple of laughter ran through the rows. Some parents glanced my way with pity, others with disgust, like I was some stray dog that had wandered into the wrong celebration. My face burned. My throat closed. But she wasn't done. She leaned toward her friends, loud enough for those around her to hear, and said, "That's not my dad. Just some man who won't leave me alone." Just like that. Years of sacrifice. Erased with one sentence. Do you know what humiliation tastes like? It's metallic. Bitter. Like blood in your mouth after you've bitten down too hard. I felt the sting of 1,000 eyes on me, strangers and acquaintances alike, each one weighing me, judging me. I wanted to disappear. To sink into the floor. But something inside me, something that had been buried under years of silence and sacrifice, snapped. I sat back down, shaking. My mind screamed 1,000 things at once. Memories. Nights of sweat. Money spent on lies. Forged papers. Rent-less bills. And her voice, cutting through it all, just some man who won't leave me alone. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was an embarrassment. That was rejection. Deliberate. Cruel. And it was in that moment, sitting under the bright lights of that grand auditorium, surrounded by applause that wasn't meant for me, that I made a decision. I wouldn't disappear. I wouldn't be erased. If she wanted to cast me aside, if she wanted to live in a world built on lies and pretend I wasn't the architect of it, then I would show her, and everyone else, exactly what those lies cost. My pulse steadied. My shame hardened into something colder. Sharper. Because right there, in that sea of celebration and pride, I began planning my revenge. And trust me when I say, it would hit harder than anything she, or that audience, ever imagined. You know that sick little thrill people get when they finally tell the truth. That moment where you imagine a weight lifting off your chest and everything will be cleaner afterward. I imagined that day, too. I pictured confession like a bandage ripped off, painful, yes, but freeing. What I didn't expect was how truth, when shouted in public, becomes something else, a weapon that cuts both ways. When she called my name again, the one that should have been a bridge, it felt like being struck. I should have left. But the auditorium had a kind of gravity, shame can anchor you just as stubbornly as pride. I rose because the only thing worse than being humiliated was letting that humiliation define my story. I walked down the aisle with my heart knocking against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could feel the temperature of the room change. Conversations dimmed. Phones lifted. The dean's eyes flicked toward me with that practiced smile adults wear when they're trying to decide whether to intervene or let theater play out. I knew I was the scene now, the anomaly in a neatly scripted service. When I reached the front row, I didn't stumble. I didn't yell. I asked, calmly, for the microphone. People probably expected a sob, an apology, a grovel. Instead I spoke like someone reading from a ledger he'd kept for years. Her name is on this program, I told them, voice steady so it carried. But that name sitting in front of you is wearing a life I paid for. Silence condensed. You could hear the rustle of programs, the click of camera shutters shifting focus. The dean stepped forward, ready to tug me away, to reclaim the ceremony. He had a nose for disasters and a training in containment. He mouthed something about protocol. I looked at him and shook my head. No, I said. Let this happen. And then I told them. Bits and pieces, no grand confessions of every sordid detail, I'm not a monster recounting step-by-step crimes for applause. But the essentials, the paid favors, the swapped papers, the silent deals made in parking lots and back offices. I spoke of envelopes and excuses, of nights I spent repairing reputations that weren't mine. I said it plainly, she had not earned all she wore today. You could see disbelief melt into curiosity into anger like paint running down a canvas. Cameras that had been trained on smiling faces began to hunt for a new angle. Phones recorded, hands trembled, and the whole auditorium seemed to tilt on its axis. She froze, the perfect snapshot of a person who'd been living in a dream and just had the dream smashed into a mirror. The practiced smile cracked, her jaw worked, she looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. For a beat she tried the defense she'd been taught, denial. "That's a lie," she mouthed. But denial left the room like an apology on a hot day. No one believed it, no one knew how to. Her friends recoiled. Some of the parents shifted their attention away, unwilling to witness the collapse of their own comfortable fantasies. Others leaned forward, hungry for scandal, the way people devour misfortune when it's not theirs. Someone shouted for security. The dean walked up, lips moving with the measured cadence of someone who's practiced saying regrettable things on camera. "Sir," he said. "You can't." He stopped because the microphone had been on me, and I had something else to say. "This isn't about drama," I said. "This is about someone you are about to send into the world with a diploma that isn't fully earned. It's about honesty, and about the truth people hide behind when they want applause." I felt the cameras close in like a second audience inside the room. Phones vibrated. The stream went live somewhere. My confession that began as a private purge found an audience of thousands within minutes. Comments flooded in, half the world declaring me hero, half calling me a monster. That distant hum arrived like a secondary thunderclap. She made a run for the stage. She wanted the podium, the platform, anything that might return her to control. When she reached it she clutched the edge like someone clinging to the last rung of a ladder. Her cheeks were wet with tears she hadn't let herself shed before. "You have no right," she screamed, voice cracking, the sound a sharp thing everyone heard even above the murmurs. "You have no right to." "You sold her a future," I said. "And today I'm selling the truth back to her." It was awful. Public shaming has a moral stench I hadn't fully considered until that moment. Faces that had once awed medals now looked down on her as if they had found something filthy in a banquet bowl. The speech she had prepared, polished lines about perseverance, about mentors, about gratitude, disintegrated into fragments. The dean called her name and her awards were whisked away by aides who didn't want to touch a scandal. Someone ushered her off stage. The crowd split into waves of whispers, not one unified voice anymore but a swarm. Afterwards, the chaos spilled out. Security escorted her out, a small group of students walked with her, some bewildered, some cold as statues. The dean tried to spin it. "This was an unfortunate disruption," he said to reporters who had already gathered and were live-streaming snippets with breathless commentary. Her scholarship letters. Put on hold pending review. Job leads she'd been dangling at interviews evaporated into messages marked "application withdrawn" or "we're pursuing other candidates." I sat in my car later with the engine off and the night pressing against the windows. My hands were numb from adrenaline and cold. People online called me everything under the sun: savior, villain, vigilante, coward. My face was a mosaic. I'd been both applauded and condemned. And in my chest, where I'd expected victory to swell, there was only a hollow that echoed. Watching her fall had been everything and nothing at once. She had broken the thing I had given her, and I had broken the thing she believed in. We were both reduced to rubble. That night, in the small hours, I opened my channel and spoke to whoever would listen. I told the truth again, but there was no triumphant tone in my voice. The comments were brutal. People judged without knowing the half they thought they knew. Some begged me to reconcile, others to vanish. But when you set a forest on fire, you don't get to pick which trees burn. I didn't sleep. The first order of business came the next morning. Investigators from the university called, emails from employers, a flood of messages demanding proof or retraction. I'd stepped into a world I couldn't step out of. The public had been served spectacle, and spectacle wanted follow-up. Evidence was demanded. Accounts were opened. Lawyers' names floated like minnows in the water around us both. And as the sun rose, I felt the quiet truth I'd avoided finally answer me: revenge changes things, but it rarely gives you the neat ending you imagine. The reckoning had been public, visceral, and absolute. But now the real work began, to live through the consequences of the thing I'd unleashed. When people talk about revenge, they imagine a clean cut. You swing the blade, you walk away lighter, freer. But what they never tell you is that the cut doesn't heal. It festers. It rots. And when the bleeding starts, it stains both of you. The day after the graduation, my phone lit up like a siren. Missed calls. Unknown numbers. Emails piling in faster than I could delete them. Reporters wanted statements. Some wanted to brand me a whistleblower, others wanted to call me a monster who destroyed his own child on stage. The story had gone viral overnight. Clips of me speaking into that microphone were stitched into memes, arguments, news panels. Everyone suddenly had an opinion on me, on her, on us. And her. She vanished. The university issued a vague statement: "We are aware of allegations regarding academic misconduct and are reviewing the matter." Just corporate jargon, but it was enough to light a firestorm. Social media tore her apart. Strangers who had never seen her face wrote threads about entitlement and fraud. Old friends ghosted her. Professors who once praised her achievements now scrubbed her name from their mouths. I thought she might call. Even just to scream at me, curse me, hate me. But silence. The only sound was the echo of what I'd done. Job offers she had lined up disappeared. Emails came in with the same cold phrases: "We regret to inform you, after reviewing recent developments, we're pursuing other candidates." Scholarships were suspended. Her future didn't just crack, it collapsed in an instant, like glass under a hammer. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, scrolling through feeds, sitting in the dim light of my kitchen at 3 a.m., wondering if this was justice or just cruelty dressed in its clothes. You see, the thing about revenge is that it doesn't freeze a moment in amber. It doesn't stop at the humiliation. It keeps going, rolling downhill, dragging you along with it. The world doesn't care who's right or wrong, it only cares about the spectacle. And now I was chained to it. People recognized me in the street. Some clapped me on the back, whispered, "Good on you." She had it coming. Others spat near my feet, muttered that I was sick, that no father should do what I did. Both kinds of stares burned. And in the quiet, the real quiet, guilt came crawling. I remembered nights I slept in my car, freezing, while she dreamed warm in her bed. I remembered the blood in my knuckles from cleaning jobs, the smell of chemicals that clung to me like a curse. I remembered the envelopes, the deals, the sins I carried for her so she wouldn't have to. And then I remembered her face on that stage, breaking in front of hundreds, her life crumbling with every word I said. For a fleeting second, I wondered if I had become the very thing I hated most, the person who robbed her of choice, of dignity. She had denied me, erased me, yes, but hadn't I just erased her in return? Still, bitterness doesn't vanish overnight. Anger has long roots, and mine coiled tight. Because let's be honest, she didn't just hurt me at that ceremony. She cut me out of her life long before that. Every sneer, every dismissal, every refusal to admit where her success came from, those were small deaths, each one a dagger I swallowed in silence. The graduation was just the final strike, the one I couldn't swallow. But here's what I didn't expect: revenge doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you vulnerable. Investigators started circling me too. If the grades were rigged, if the system was compromised, then I was just as guilty as she was. Whispers about fraud, bribery, even forgery. I thought I could aim the spotlight only at her, but I forgot, light spreads. And now it was illuminating me, every corner I tried to keep hidden. I spent nights shredding old papers, deleting emails, burning memories I couldn't risk being found. The paranoia grew louder than the guilt. Every knock on the door sounded like handcuffs. Every phone vibration felt like exposure. And yet, in the middle of that storm, I couldn't stop replaying her face in my head. Not the proud mask she wore walking into the ceremony, but the moment it shattered, eyes wide, lips trembling, the horror of realizing her perfect world was collapsing. I had built that world. I had destroyed it. And the look she gave me, equal parts shock, rage, and heartbreak, is something I know will haunt me long after the internet finds a new scandal. One night, I opened a blank document, just like I'm opening my mouth here for you. I started writing it all down. The sacrifices. The lies. The betrayal. The revenge. I wrote not to justify myself, but because I couldn't carry it alone anymore. If the world was going to judge me, I wanted them to know the whole story, not just the viral clip. That's why you're hearing this now. Because the aftermath didn't end at the graduation. It didn't end when her scholarships vanished or when I was called a monster. It's still unraveling, every day. Revenge isn't a single strike. It's a wildfire. And once it's lit, you don't get to control which way it burns. So here I sit, half satisfied, half ruined. Watching her fall gave me a twisted relief, yes. But watching her lost, broken, cut off from everything I fought for. That part keeps me awake. And the cruelest truth of all. For the first time in her life, she's facing the world without me covering her mistakes. But the question gnaws at me every night, did I teach her a lesson, or did I just destroy the only thing I ever loved? You ever look at the wreckage of your own choices and wonder if you've gone too far? That's where I found myself after the ceremony. Every morning, the silence in my house felt heavier. No calls from her, no footsteps, no voice. Just the echo of what I'd done. Then one evening, the silence broke. A knock on the door. Not the sharp rap of an investigator, not the neighbor's casual tap. This one was hesitant. Slow. Almost, afraid. I opened the door and there she was. My daughter. But not the daughter the world knew. Not the polished, confident, untouchable graduate in her robes. No, this was a ghost of her. Eyes hollow, cheeks pale, clothes wrinkled like she hadn't slept in days. She stood there, clutching nothing, just trembling hands at her sides. For a moment, we just stared. Neither of us knew whether to scream, cry, or collapse. Then she spoke. Why? One word. Small, fragile. But it sliced through me harder than any curse. I tried to hold her gaze, but my throat tightened. I wanted to spit out the truth, that I did it because she humiliated me, because she erased me, because she made me bleed for her and then denied I existed. But when I looked at her, all I saw was the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders, pointing at the stars, asking if she could ever touch them. I swallowed. Because you forgot who built you those wings. Her eyes glistened. A tear fell, but her voice hardened. You didn't build me wings. You built me a cage. You never gave me a choice. You just pushed, and when I didn't love you the way you wanted, you broke me. Her words hit like hammer blows. Part of me wanted to scream back, to remind her of every sacrifice, every scar, every night I bled just to keep her future alive. But deep inside, I knew, she wasn't wrong. I had wanted her success to be mine as much as hers. I wanted her to shine, but I wanted my fingerprints on every ray of light. I stepped closer. She didn't move. You think I caged you? Maybe I did. But you erased me. You stood there, in front of everyone, and acted like I was nothing. Like I never existed. My voice cracked. Do you know what that feels like? To be a ghost at your own daughter's celebration? She flinched. The tears came harder now, streaming down her face. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She just looked, broken. And then she whispered, I lost everything because of you. Silence. The kind that swallows you whole. I should have felt victorious. That was the plan, right? To take it all away, to show her the price of betrayal. But standing there, watching her crumble, I realized victory didn't taste like I thought it would. It wasn't sweet. It was ash in my mouth. I reached out a hand. Not to pull her in, not to force her, just to let her know I was still there. She hesitated, staring at my palm as if it were a knife. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, trembling, hesitant, she placed her hand in mine. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was something messier, heavier. A silent acknowledgement of the fire we had both set. We sat down that night, no words, just the weight of everything between us. The lies. The sacrifices. The betrayal. The revenge. Two people who destroyed each other, sitting in the ruins together. And here's the truth I need you to hear: revenge doesn't give closure. It doesn't fix what was broken. All it does is trade one wound for another. I thought I was teaching her a lesson, but in the end, I was teaching myself. That anger makes you blind. That pride makes you cruel. And that the people you hurt most are the ones closest to you. Do I regret it? Yes. And no. Because she'll never forget the cost of turning her back on me. And I'll never forget the cost of turning my anger into a weapon. We didn't hug. We didn't cry in each other's arms. We just sat in silence until the night turned to morning, both of us knowing nothing would ever be the same again. And maybe that's the real ending. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just two people scarred for life, bound by blood, bound by bitterness, sitting in the ashes of what they once built. So if you came here expecting a happy ending, you won't find it. If you came here expecting triumph, maybe you'll call this justice. But for me? For her? This is just the wreckage. And maybe, that's all revenge ever leaves behind. And that's where it all ends, or maybe where it all begins. Tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Or would you have walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know if you see me as a villain, or just a father pushed too far. And if this story shook you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who loves suspense, and subscribe to the channel, because there are more stories, darker and deeper, still to come. Your support keeps me going, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's next.